We're pleased to welcome you to the AUSA Noon Report, our virtual series featuring senior Army leaders, providing important updates on key defense topics. Kicking off today's event is AUSA's Vice President for Membership, Meetings, and Technology, Brigadier General Jack Haley, U.S. Army retired.
Good afternoon, and welcome to the Association of the United States Army's Army Women in Tech Noon Report. We're very glad you've joined us today, and AUSA appreciates your continued support for these programs and events. I would like to thank our sponsor, EY, for their support of this edition of the Noon Report. EY has been an AUSA national partner since February 2020. Our host today is Ms. Jen Pratt, Principal for EY's Government and Public Sector, who will be leading our Fireside Chat and audience Q&A. Ms. Pratt brings over 24 years of client-facing solution delivery experience, both within the public and private sector. She has deep expertise in technology delivery, program management, and business transformations. Joining us today is Major General Maria Barrett, Commanding General of the United States Army Network Enterprise Technology Command, NETCOM. Major General Barrett has served in key roles in cyber, to include Deputy Director of Current Ops, J3, U.S. Cyber Command, and Deputy Commander Operations for the Cyber National Mission Force. She is commanded at all levels to include company, battalion, and brigade, which included the commander of 160th Signal Brigade. Ms. Nancy Kreidler was selected for the Senior Executive Service and assumed her duties as the Director of Cybersecurity and Information Assurance at the Headquarters, Department of the Army Chief Information Officer, and G6 in March 2019. She currently serves in that position for the Army Deputy Chief of Staff, G6, following CIO and G6 realignment into separate staffs. She previously served as the CIO to the Program Executive Officer, Command Control Communications Tactical, or C3T. For details of their robust accomplishments, decorations, and assignments, you can access their full bios in the Handout tab on the upper right-hand corner of your screen. And if you have questions for our speakers today, please use the Q&A tab and post your question in the box at the lower right side of your screen. We'll try our best to answer as many of your questions as time will allow. Now we'll get the conversation started with a fireside chat with our hosts and speakers today, and then address questions from the audience. So please start thinking about what you would like to ask as we welcome Major General Barrett and Miss Nancy Kreidler. Jen, the floor is all yours.
Thank you, General Haley, and good afternoon, everyone. I'm very honored to be here this afternoon to facilitate this discussion and to hear from two amazing leaders that really exemplify leadership in technology, but also leading with purpose. So we're going to touch on that a little bit today as well. For anybody like myself who is out in the trenches delivering technology, the work is very hard and the challenges can be significant. So finding your connection to purpose, understanding mission outcomes is really probably the most powerful engagement tool that I've personally connected with and has been meaningful to my teams that I've been honored to lead over the years. A personal passion of mine is really helping other women succeed in the technology sector. There are just more roles than we can fill for talent across the board, so diversity is critical. In providing advocacy and mentorship to women coming into the space is important for everybody to take a role in. Having important forums like this where we create a sense of community for us to learn from each other is really an important, powerful tool as well. So I thank AUSA for making this happen today. So we'll get started in the discussion. And before we jump to questions, I'm going to ask our esteemed panelists to share a few thoughts to get started. I'm going to start with General Barrett, who is on the line, if you want to share a few opening thoughts.
Yeah, thanks, Jen. I, like many of my peers, have spent a career really not wanting to focus on the fact that we were female or that we were a minority in our ranks. We put our head down and we strive to be the best signal officer, the best leader that we can be, and contribute to the team in a meaningful way. You talked about purpose, and that really does, it served us well. But about 15 years ago, I would say, I think it was about 15 years ago, I went back to Fort Gordon. I was a lieutenant colonel, battalion commander at the time, and I offered to the signal school, hey, I'm willing to do an OPD with your students. And they said, great, come on by at about 3:00. And I was at first disappointed because what they set up was a female officer professional development session. And I'm kind of like, hey, I'm a leader for everybody. I want to professionally develop everybody. But what I quickly realized were the questions that those young lieutenants were asking were the same questions I was asking 22 years ago, the same concerns they had, and that they still required a role model to come in and say, it's okay. This is how you deal with this. This is what I would recommend. Don't worry about that. And so it's still very necessary. When I was growing up through the ranks, there were very few, for the first half of my career, there were very few female role models. And so honestly, it was men who understood leadership, men who understood mentorship that really were the most valuable asset to me. And I took advantage of that. And so there's two sides of this, right? There is a role for female role models and mentorship in this equation, but we can't leave our other partners, the men, out of that equation as well. And I know we'll talk a little bit more about mentorship later, at least I hope. Thanks.
Thank you for that. Ms. Kreidler, would you like to say a few words to start?
Yeah, so I've been at this for 36 years, a little older than you, Maria, and I had less role models. But I was a contractor for 12 years, and during my first 12 years coming out of college, where I was often in computer science, the only woman in the classroom, as a contractor, I was denied a promotion because I was told I was too aggressive. For those who know me would probably laugh at that and say, yeah, of course you are. But that was the reason why I didn't get the promotion. I was also the only woman in the room then. And as a computer scientist, I was expected to take the notes because I was the only female. So the assumption was that I was the executive assistant or the secretary. And then when I went out for maternity leave, when I came back, and it's funny because I just told this story to a younger person, and I said, I got a pink slip. And they were like, what's a pink slip? And they didn't even know what a pink slip was. And I said, well, a pink slip is what you get when you leave and you come back and it's on your desk and they say your job is no longer available. And it was funny because the slip was, I remember the slip because it was one of those, when you're out of office and somebody leaves a note on your desk, like while you were out, it's like, while you were giving birth, we gave your job away. And I, when women give birth and they come back and somebody does something like that, it's like I was a different person. And so I remember going into the company president and said, you can rip this up or it's going to be exhibit A in court. And they ripped it up. And so, fast forward to now, and I'm often the only woman at the table, but at least now I'm sitting at the head of the table.
Thank you for that. So there's a lot to share, and I think we're going to dive right into the questions. We've got a whole bunch, and please encourage the audience as you have questions to put them up there. Nothing that we won't try to answer. So let's get started. You touched on this a little bit. I'll start with you, Ms. Kreidler, with this question. Are there any particular challenges you've observed in recruiting and retaining women in technology?
So federal government recruiting, as we know, is a challenge in and of itself because of the process. But I would say the pool that's applying for these jobs is very small with regard to women, and that's just the statistics actually even coming out of college. And so, it's really how do we get women back into the workforce in this IT area? These are where all the jobs are. This is where, you can make money. Now, women are so prevalent in other industries, right? In medical and in teaching, and we don't pay them what they're worth. But for younger people coming up, there's something that happens when girls turn into teenagers and they don't want to be the smartest person in the room. This has all been documented. that they don't want to show how smart they are. I mean, it's all part of who we are. And it's an obstacle to overcome that I don't think people understand when girls turn 13, 14, 15, and 16, that maybe science isn't what they're like really focusing on, but it could be what they're really good in. So really comes, I think, with the underpinnings of it's got to be okay. It's got to be maybe presented in a different way. Gaming versus something else. Is there something else that would attract women? So I would say it's kind of indoctrinated from the beginning to say, this is not something that we're really interested in. And it doesn't even look that interesting to us, but there's so much interest out there. It's just unfortunate. If I get 30 resumes, 5 will be women and 25 will be men.
General Barrett, any thoughts on your side of what you see from a recruiting and talent perspective? I think the sort of share the sentiments broadly, and just in our sector as well. It's a big challenge. Anything that you see from your purview?
Well, Nancy hit on a lot of the themes, and we're all struggling with the same thing. It doesn't matter whether you're on the DoD side of the house or probably on the industry side of the house. We are definitely in a race for talent in this particular in the STEM field. And so when you take a look at that, whenever you see that there is any sort of underserved population, we're talking about women, but it could be women, it could be South Dakotans. But the race for talent is so real. We actually really have to take a look at that very seriously with our talent management programs and go, where are we underserved? And then how do we get after that? And so is it by exposing, encouraging, and engaging early? Is there something that we can do from a military perspective, even within our own communities? If I walk down to the Sierra Vista High School and I went to an AP math class, and if it appeared to be out of balance, what can we do from a volunteer standpoint with the community to maybe energize participation? There's a number of organizations that are focused on generating more female participation in coding groups. I think the democratization of coding is really a big thing that we should take advantage of and see as an opportunity with low and no code to gain experience, and that this is an area where you can flourish and compete. And so I think getting after some of this early, we can bridge that a little bit with our intern programs and look to bring additional people in early in their careers into entry-level positions, expose them to the types of jobs that we can offer them in the Army and get them excited about that. But if the pipeline is not building them, Jen, Nancy, myself, we're all going to feel that pain in the pipeline. And so you've got to really take a look at the whole life cycle and understand where you need to apply some effort.
I love those thoughts. I think you both make great points. It starts early. As a mom of a daughter who's in high school, who's exceptional at math and science, but said ew to the engineering program, even though she would really. There is a stigma that exists even when that's my daughter. So apparently she doesn't think I'm cool enough to follow my track. So maybe that's something I've got to fix. To stay on that thread of, I think fostering more women in this space, I want to talk a little bit about mentorship and even sponsorship, because they're slightly different, and would like to get your thoughts. We'll start this, General Barrett, with you. How have you approached mentorship for yourself, but also being a mentor to others, and what can you advise women in the space to really sort of advocate for themselves?
Yeah, so I touched on this at the beginning, and I think the main point is mentor people and would be willing to be mentored by people who don't look like yourself. So if your whole mentorship circle is females, I'm going to say you're missing out on a perspective that would be very useful if you're cutting out, a large portion of your particular organization. And so I think it works best when it's balanced. because you get that perspective. You also get comfortable dealing with each other. And I'll tell you a story. I had a male officer who asked me to mentor 2 or 3 female officers, senior officers, about the Army's new physical fitness test, the ACFT, because I had shared my journey about how to prepare for this test with this male officer. And so he asked me to mentor 2 or 3 females. But then I realized the reason why he was asking me to do this is because he was apprehensive about talking to women about a C-section and how to do a leg tuck. And I came back and I gave him some mentorship or counsel and said, do you have a close peer that you feel comfortable talking to? And he said, yes. And I said, have this conversation with her. Get comfortable having these conversations with somebody who isn't like you. And you'll get some reps and sets and then be comfortable with it. And so I encourage both sides to get comfortable being the only women in the room. Get comfortable being the only women in the room, and then asking, can I join your golf foursome this weekend? You know, get comfortable putting yourself out there. And after a while, it will be second nature. It'll be habit. Likewise, the men need to think about, how can I have these conversations with women in a way that I'm not uncomfortable with it anymore either.
That's great advice. And I'm going to maybe ask you to elaborate a little bit further on that, but also General Barrett touched on this, and if you have thoughts here as well around giving women opportunities to have a voice and feeling more comfortable with that, because that's such a powerful entry point. So any thoughts there too would also be helpful.
I would say on the men, earlier in my career, probably about 15 years in, I did a lot of mentoring, recruitment from colleges. I did a program with a local high school called Girls in Engineering, Math, and Science, before we had the name STEM. Then we would bring them in as interns. And then my career happened. And it's like the whole middle part, I didn't do anything. And now that I'm winding down, I'm really going back into this whole mentoring, coaching area of my career. And so I have an executive leadership coaching certificate. I'm Gallup Strength Finder certified. I spend every Friday coaching or mentoring or sponsoring. And the sponsoring is important. So most of my career I spent with engineers and scientists. And these people are generally introverted. And so to get them to come and talk to you, is a challenge. You have to meet them where they are. And so, the Gallup Strength Finder tool was good because it talked about them and it gave us something to talk about. But there's a book called Quiet, and it's about introverts. There are people that are sitting in the room with you that have so much to add, but they don't know how to do it. They're scared, they're nervous, they don't know how to. You have to learn how to draw those people out. It's not always the loudest person at the table. It could be the quietest person in the room. And I have found those people throughout my career and became their sponsors, and make sure that they're getting training, they're getting mentoring, they know where they're going in the next job, that people introduce them. And so the sponsoring to me is when I pick up the phone and say, hey, don't hire this person, just interview them, just give them an interview. And it works out a lot of the time. And they're like, oh my gosh, we didn't know, because that doesn't come through on a resume. So Fridays I spend mentoring. I wouldn't say that there's more women than men. I think people in general, and this goes back to what Maria says, this is just not a women only thing. I mean, it really is everybody. People are just starved for somebody to talk to help them to navigate through their career. And it takes time. I mean, it takes time out of my day, but it's the time and I don't see an immediate return on investment. But to me, it's the best investment that I can make. And so I see, as I'm ending my career, all these people that I've mentored through and I'm, it's like having I'm so proud of that. And so part of the being at the head of the table now, and I would say just for anybody, if you're in a room and there's a table and no one's telling you not to sit at the table, always sit at the table, especially women. I can't tell you how many times I see women around the side of come up to the table. So, as a leader, I ask questions. I just say, so-and-so, what do you think? What is your opinion? And it gives them a voice in the room, but that's my responsibility to do that. And if I don't, they don't seem to have a voice.
Yeah. Can I add on there, Jen?
Please.
So I think the other thing that I'm spending some time talking to women about is what I'm observing is either overthinking it or fatigue. And the fact that maybe they're at this point, and then I'm seeing this at the mid and senior levels where they've gotten to this point, they've made it through several different cuts, and now that they are in the spotlight, or at least they're perceiving that they're in the spotlight, and they're overthinking things, and really, and it's kind of relax. What got you here is still there. Like any other individual, I expect you to continue to grow, male or female, in these positions. Don't overthink it. And I was preparing for a panel a few years ago, and this idea of fatigue came up. Why were women leaving the workforce? They were coming into this field, but they weren't staying. And this idea of fatigue, somebody had done some research on, do women or men talk more in the workplace? And he attached recorders to them. And the bottom line is it's even. But what he found was when women started to come in, get ready for a meeting, a briefing to their boss, or in front of their peers, didn't matter where they stood in the echelon of the organization, inordinate amount of time preparing for it. And I'm not advocating that women walk into the boardroom and be unprepared, but they were doing way more than what was being done with the men. And so maybe they thought that they were checking out because of family, but this concept of fatigue maybe is something that we should take a look at is relax. You have something to contribute at the table. It's not that hard. Once you get used to putting yourself out there, the habit, it will not require as much energy to exercise, and then it will be normal.
Thank you for that. I think, excellent point. We were talking a little bit about this as we were getting organized here. And one of the things that we're finding with some of what you're bringing up, General Barrett, is esteem at the core for women is the subtlety of what's pervasive. And so do I feel like I belong? Am I comfortable with? I think the power of this type of setting and creating communities that women can feel comfortable exercising and doing that work that you said to get comfortable is so critical to, sort of bolstering that esteem dynamic. You were going to say something that I want to.
Yeah. So I don't know if people followed Brene Brown, but confidence, right? So what Brene Brown says, and it's actually a Theodore Roosevelt quote, and it's the man in the arena, right? And it's don't sit in the cheap seats. The people that are contributing are the people that are bloodied in the arena. And so when you get up to that table, it's not going to be easy all the time, but you're doing it, right? You're doing it. And so that's just, it's just part of the equation. So it doesn't always, people, and it's exactly what Maria said, it's preparing too much. You're there to contribute. It doesn't always work out, but probably works out most of the time.
I want to play off that point that you brought up, General Barrett, about fatigue. There's a question that came in, which I think is a good one and incredibly relevant right now, that, post the COVID realities and people coming back to work, the stats are clear that women are leaving in higher percentages. People are making shifts in their careers, generally speaking. And so we're losing critical talent all over the place, and women are leaving in higher numbers. What are you all seeing and thinking about from an Army perspective to try to counteract that retention issue for people generally, and then very specifically for women?
Yeah. So, for my own organization prior to COVID, I think we were about 10% teleworking, no more. And then when COVID hit, we found ourselves in a unique situation where, one, we were, as you know, the provider of the Army networks, we were supposed to be, we needed to enable the Army to do their own telework. And that meant we had to enable our own mission while executing telework. And so this was an interesting journey for us. And bottom line, what we found is while there were some extroverts who did not like teleworking because they lost that connection with people, my introverts loved it. My introverts were able to come to the table and now put themselves out there in a chat instead of actually speaking. And that was fantastically, effective as well. You heard from some people that you actually didn't hear from before. And overall, a lot of people remarked that they were busier. They could do more. They could do more outreach with other organizations because of the rich collaboration tool that we were using shortly after COVID kicked off. So the mission didn't fail. Matter of fact, the mission grew, and we were very successful, I believe. And so now you have to I ask myself the question, and I take a look at my telework guidance for the command, and I say, do we need to change this? Because have we left talent on the table in the recruiting or retention process in the life cycle of our workforce because we did not consider telework, that we were too conservative with our approach to getting the mission done. And we've just proven you can get most missions done in a telework environment or a partial telework environment. So I'm actively encouraging my subordinate commands and headquarters to pursue this and I don't expect us to stay at 10%. I don't know what the right percentage is, but I now feel like our supervisors are more confident in supervising a telework workforce. We've been doing it for the last 15 months. So this is not new territory now. They know how to do this. And I think this opens up opportunities for females in the workforce who want to explore this way of working.
Good points. Anything?
Yeah, so I will say as soon as USA Jobs has some kind of category that you can sort on that says either remote or explains, doesn't say telework eligible, actually says how much telework is eligible, I think there's going to be a huge shift in this workforce if you don't get on board with that. Because I have people now that they want to stay home, and if they're going to have to come in, they're like, why? I can do my job at home. And so there is a contingent of people that think that if I don't see you, you're not working. But I will tell you, my telework management philosophy is that the people who work at work will work at home, and the people who don't work at work are not going to work at home. Nothing's going to change.
I think we probably all share that assessment. So how, it is an interesting challenge for all of us right now with, things just coming back to normal. So we've talked a lot about that sort of in the warm up to this is, people are, coming back to the office more prevalently. It's not comfortable for everybody lots of folks don't really want to do that. And so empowering people to make that choice for telework is a great tool. What do you see on the downsides of that in terms of keeping that sense of community and connection to mission and to team? How do you all think about those types of challenges within your ranks?
So I did something a little unique when COVID started, in that I started to have, especially with teams set up in video, we had a daily call, and it took maybe 15 minutes. I have about 30 civilians that work for me. And every day initially I did it because we didn't know what was going on. Everybody was nervous. And so I wanted to hear and see that everybody was okay. And so the way we did that was I took roll call, but I did it by asking a daily question. So every day I asked a question. Well, here we are almost 16 months later. And I'm doing it now 2 to 3 times a week because people are starting to come in. But through this, everybody learned about everyone. We know what they like to eat. We know who was the most influential in their childhood. There were people that sat next to each other that never talked. So like Maria said, I mean, people who are chatting because they feel safe in that space. And now you're getting all this intellectual capital that you didn't even know, sharing. The collaboration has been tremendous. And so I still do that. And now, again, as a senior leader, so it takes me 15 minutes. Again, do I see an ultimate, a significant return on investment immediately? No. But what I've established is trust in a group. We've been able to have, through all the Black Lives Matter and all the racial tensions and all that, we've had those hard conversations because we've built trust in our group. And, it's been magical. It really has. And who knew? I mean, it was never planned to be that way. It was just planned to check on people. So I saw it as a huge advantage, and I'll still continue that if we have this kind of split workforce.
That's a really great tool. I'm going to steal that, if you don't mind. And I like that notion of trust in group. I think that's huge. So let's pivot a little bit to the tech of it all, and maybe I'll throw this to General Barrett to start. Any particular thoughts that you could share around how COVID changed your thinking around NetComm and G6's approach to the use of technology in the workplace?
So I think there's something about, there's the richness of the collaboration. When I first, we got into COVID pre-teams, and I asked my chief of staff, I said, hey, what are the options that we have to communicate with each other? And she made a chart, and it was horrific. The lowest common denominator was a telephone bridge, and so I was extremely disappointed as the commander of NetComm. But I knew Teams was on the horizon, and I knew it would be a game changer because there are similar platforms as well, and I was very comfortable with those platforms, and so I said as soon as we get there, we're racing as fast as we can to get everybody on board, and we haven't looked back. The screaming fast rate of adoption of technology, new technology, like we did with Teams, and we're continuing to do, I think is really a key idea that we should seize on. And even to reinforce this, if you, I think Harvard Business Review had an article, I don't know if it was last iteration or before that, about adoption. It isn't about the technology that a particular country is producing. It is about their ability to absorb that technology and leverage it. And I think we have changed the game with what we just went through in the last year. The target is softened in military parlance. We are now maybe more receptive to change than we were before. And now we're going to do email migration. And it's not going to be like we did before and take 4 years. We're going to do it in less than a year. And we're going to migrate everybody to a new platform. The target is softened. This is now going to be the new normal where we insert technology into our daily lives in a way and at a speed that we never did before. And it's going to be normal. And I'm really excited about the opportunity because again, our approach to fielding new capabilities, it doesn't matter whether you're working at the Pentagon or you're down in a tactical unit. These have been, year-long efforts, right, that we roll these out. And I think this is great. I'm so optimistic about where we are right now. I don't know if you have another thought on that, Nancy.
Yeah, I agree, absolutely, because we all went to CVR, right? And then we just now migrated to A365. And I've never seen the Army roll out a tool where everybody, instead of complaining, is just waiting and using, right? Because they want it, because they know the value of it. I've never seen that in my lifetime. Kudos to your team, Maria, for doing that.
Well, we need to keep it up, though. I mean, adoption rate, I think, is a factor that we have to consider with technology, and not go back to the way that we used to do it I think there's potential, extreme potential here.
I think that's a great, benefit opportunity out of all of this is you're right. We've seen it all over the market space is the move to technology to enable work, to enable mission, to solve for pandemic crisis response at the states to the federal government has been really exciting to see. Wrong way you want to see it, but the outcome on the other side is learning to do things rapidly in a much more agile way, I think. And I completely agree on the topic of adoption. People's desire to consume tech is a lot different at this point as well. I'm going to shift for a quick sec, General Barrett, while we're on NetCom's role. What are you thinking through in terms of initiatives that tie into the multi-domain operations strategy for the Army at this point? Are there top-level things you can share with the group, in this forum that would be interesting for people to hear?
So I think when you take a look at, you've done a whole host of noon reports and had leaders from different parts of the Army come in, and I'm sure they have all touched on what they're contributing to multi-domain operations. But I think one of the key components of this is, and what we need to be prepared for from the comms community is the data flows that are going to be absolutely essential at the tactical level, all the way through the strategic and to the cloud. And so really being able to understand those data flows is going to be important. And that's what we're focusing on is how do we have an architecture that really supports that and lets us surge where we need to, and for the specific capabilities that require that type of data in order to do, long range precision fires or some other key modernization initiative to support the project convergence initiatives. And so I think that piece for us is, so how do you set the network in a way that allows us to see this? Can we flatten it more? It's very segmented. It has been built that way either because the technology wasn't there to do it as a big Army. We're big. We're bigger than any of the other services. And so there were technical limitations to how we built, why we built our networks this way. There were security limitations as well. I don't think I know those aren't the reason anymore. We can go flatter and allow us to maneuver the network at the speed, but we got to start doing that now in order to meet the 2028 waypoint. I think this other piece about data, there are definitely skill sets within our formation that we need to, if we don't have them today, SDN, or we need to build them out more robustly. And I have a small team of data scientists that I'm using for DoDN operations, but I also need data managers, a distinctly different skill set on board in order to help us manage these data flows and really harvest what is available in our data to maneuver the network. And so those are two areas of concentration that I have going forward towards 2028.
It's such a great point around data. As tech in the business application side gets leaner and easier to put out there, really without the data right and the accessibility of data, it's meaningless. So the tech gets easier to deploy. The data is the complicated part. It's sort of the iceberg under the water level, so to speak. So when we talk about data, then I instantly think cyber and risk, and that's where a lot of the exposure is. Or anything that you
Yeah.
want to add to that?
So under General Morrison, the G6 for the Army, he has 4 pillars that we're driving on, and the first is what Maria said, was to set the unified network in support of MDO. The second pillar that he has is to align cyber and signal forces to support and execute that unified network. And then third is to operationalize cybersecurity, and the fourth is to make sure that the budget is aligned with those pillars in the most optimal way. And so in the cybersecurity bucket, we are operationalizing the risk management framework, which everyone hates. But we are going to continuous monitoring in the Army, authorize once, monitor always, in all ways, in this next fiscal year, with the support of a whole bunch of people and Maria's team as well. And so that is what we're looking to do and we're focused on.
That's great insight. So, to that end, the opportunities for talent are clearly, out there. What are you seeing? I don't know if change is the right way to think about it, but how are these changes opening up opportunities in the IT space and in defense specifically, there where women, you think, have an opportunity to really succeed and jump in?
So I think there's a huge change with the focus on diversity, equity, and inclusion. So I see, Ann Neuberger is the cybersecurity advisor in the White House, and we just saw a woman, I wrote her name down, Jen Easterly for CISA. So I see a lot of women actually in the cybersecurity realm. Now, I think the dirty secret is that at some point cybersecurity, when it first started, wasn't important to anyone, and it was all filled by women. When I look back at my career, I can see more than half of the cybersecurity people I worked with, it was information assurance then, were women. And once you have a woman in a role, it's not unusual to see another woman in that role, and that's a big deal. And that's why it's, when you see a woman for the first time, we have a new Secretary of the Army who's a woman, that means it can happen again. And so those are really groundbreaking times. So I think the diversity, just in general, I think in the cybersecurity is just kind of a one-off. Get women into cybersecurity because I think people are more apt to be receptive, but I think the change is in all the other fields.
Yeah, that's great insight. General Barrett, anything from your perspective on opportunities for women?
I think when we thought about IT before, we thought about, maybe somebody geeking out, building a computer in their basement in their spare time, and maybe that was associated with a particular gender. I don't know. But I think when we start to take, and going back to the data piece, okay, so if I go down to, the Sierra Vista High School, to use that analogy again, and I walk into an AP math class and I see a female absolutely killing it in the AP math class, that's opportunity from a data scientist standpoint. So the application now has the things that we're getting into is not just somebody building a computer in their basement who has some skill there, right? We're bringing the umbrella is much broader in terms of how we operate our networks. If you look at industry and how they're doing predictive analytics on performance of the networks and the defense of the networks, right? There's a mathematician behind all of that. And then there's a developer, going back to the low no code, let's start them early, right? There's a developer also building something for those analytics. And then there is the data manager, to make sure that we optimize that available data. And so I'm encouraged by the ability to encompass more people under that umbrella that may have thought, what's math got to do with computers or networks? And from my perspective, it has a bunch to do. And I can bring you in onto the team and give you some purpose.
I like how the tie back to purpose, I think, is a big part of this too, and engaging more women in the field is really making the linkage to being that smart in math leads you to data opportunities, leads you to powering up mission, solving problems, whatever that, sector might be, those connections will matter. So I like how you sort of tie back into purpose there. So as we wrap up, I want to leave you guys with one final question of, what would be that sort of one piece of advice that you would give to women or men in the audience that are in this sector that want to either come into technology or grow their technology careers? What piece of advice would you give those folks?
I think for parents, I would say when your kids go to college, have them minor in some STEM field as a backup. So if you're going to go get an English major, get an IT minor, because maybe you can be a tech writer, right? There's some value in having a plan B in an area that's so important. For technology, for women, it's somewhat of a confidence challenge all the time. We suffer that a little bit more. And so, find a mentor, find someone you can talk to, reach out, don't go it alone. If you are in some place that's a bad situation, don't wait around to think it's going to get better when it's not. Leave, go find where you're valued.
General Barrett, any final thoughts for advice?
Yeah, I would say for leaders in this field, understand that your workforce is varied. Nancy mentioned that a good portion of them are introverts. Understand that a diverse team is the best team. And if you see under subscription in any particular sector, the race for talent is real, you have to bring people in, whether they're your existing workforce, and engage them in a way that encourages them to participate. You have to do that. You have to take a look at your recruiting programs, where you are spending time, and are you leaving talent on the table because of a workforce rule anomaly regarding, we talked about telework. So, as a leader, I think you have to look at the full life cycle spectrum of your workforce and understand where it is that you might have a gap or a weak area that you want to emphasize on, and get after it quickly and consistently. If you take it for granted that talent's going to come to you, that good resumes are going to keep popping in on USA Jobs, I think you're going to find yourself in trouble. And it's really hard to catch up from there. So be actively thinking about how you diversify your workforce if you're undersubscribed. You cannot leave any talent on the table. You can't leave the introverts on the table. You can't leave the women on the table. You can't leave the South Dakotans on the table.
Diversity is the power to all of this. So thank you both for participating today. Your words were powerful, helpful, and I think, again, the sense of community to have these kind of discussions is part of how we solve getting women comfortable getting into the arena, so to speak, with us. So with that, I'll turn it back over to wrap up.
Well, thank you, Jen, for leading a great discussion. And thanks to General Barrett and Ms. Kreidler for joining us today. Before we close, I want to inform you of some upcoming events at AUSA. On 3 August, join us for a noon report discussion of the Army's Climate Strategy and Action Plan with Jack Sharash, senior official performing the duties of the Assistant Secretary of the Army for Installations, Energy, and Environment, and Ms. Amy Borman, Deputy Assistant Secretary of the Army for Environment, Safety, and Occupational Health. On 31 August, we are back in person hosting an Army Aviation Hot Topic here at AUSA. And we're very excited to be back in person for our annual meeting. So please save the date for the 2021 AUSA Annual Meeting and Exposition from October 11th to 13th here in Washington, D.C. Registration is now open. For registration and more information on all AUSA events, visit our website at ausa.org. We'd like to once again thank our sponsor, EY, for their support of this event. Events like this would not be possible without the contributions of sponsors like you. And finally, we want to thank all of you who are AUSA members. Membership matters. And through your membership, your support of soldiers, Army civilians, families, and veterans is phenomenal, and you help us put on programs like today's Noon Report. Please take another look at our robust member benefits. Membership pays for itself if you use your benefits. Join AUSA or renew your membership at ausa.org. And thank you again for your attendance, and have a great Army Day.